Greetings, Pokefans! Michael here, and evolution has been a big part of the Pokemon franchise ever since the beginning. However, as time has gone along, a lot of evolution methods have gotten pretty complicated. Because of this, a lot of Pokemon are just flat out annoying to have to evolve. So today, I wanted to list off the 15 Pokemon whose evolution processes I think are the most annoying. Each entry will be the fully evolved Pokemon, since a lot of the Pokemon come from branched evolution lines where the other methods are not as annoying, and also the list is in no particular order, except the last entry, number 15, is the one that I think is the most annoying. But before we dive into the list, this video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends is a brand new collection RPG game with great graphics, strategic gameplay, huge boss fights, an amazing storyline, and over 400 champions for you to collect and personally customize. My favorite champion is the Drake because dragons are objectively cool. This game has something for everyone and is extremely well reviewed, having a near perfect score on the App Store with over 200,000 reviews. Plus, it's completely free. There's also a spectacular new loyalty program where new players can get a new daily login bonus for their first 90 days in the game. That is a huge amount of time. So what are you waiting for? Head down to the description below, click on my special link, and download Raid Shadow Legends. You'll get 50,000 silver and a free epic champion as part of the new player program to start your journey. So now that we've covered that, don't forget to leave a like on the video, and let's get started with number 1, Sylveon. Sylveon's evolution method is two-pronged. The more memorable part of it is the affection part. In either Pokemon Amie or Pokemon Refresh, you must get at least 2 hearts of affection on your Eevee. If you have gotten far enough into one of the Alola Pokemon games and therefore have access to Rainbow Pokebeans, this task is not particularly difficult. However, if you're in a Generation 6 game or don't have any Rainbow Beans, this can take quite a lot of time, because you have to feed it, pet it, and play with it a lot, and usually you can't do this all in one go since your Eevee will get full. But the second aspect of this evolution is that your Eevee has to know a fairy type move when it levels up. This is something that I often forget about, since to me it just seems like an extra unnecessary part of it that they just tacked on for no reason. The only 2 fairy type moves that Eevee can learn are Baby Doll Eyes and Charm, which it learns at levels 9 and 29 respectively. It can learn no fairy type moves by Move Tutor or by TM. While these moves are not super difficult to get access to, a lot of times it's still annoying to deal with. The reason for that is because many times when you obtain an Eevee, it is too high level to know Baby Doll Eyes, but it's not yet high enough level to know Charm. There is of course the option of using heart scales at the move reminder to teach it one of these moves, but having to spend a heart scale on a move you're probably gonna delete immediately after you evolve it is not fun. So the fact that you have to deal with both getting its affection high enough and teaching it a fairy type move means that evolving an Eevee into a Sylveon is a pretty annoying process. There is another evolution that is exceptionally annoying to get, and no, it's not the friendship ones. It is number 2, Glaceon. An Eevee will evolve into a Glaceon if it levels up in the vicinity of an ice rock. Now, while doing that leveling up itself isn't particularly difficult, the process as a whole is pretty annoying due to the locations of the ice rocks. In Sinnoh, it is on Route 217, a bit south of Snowpoint City. In Unova, it is in a deep cave within Twist Mountain. In Kalos, it is found deep within Frost Cavern. In Hoenn, it is found in the deepest ice cave of Shoal Cave, and in Alola, it is found within Mount Lanakila. Every single one of these rocks is not accessible until late game, requiring you to have 6 badges at a minimum. But in some games, it's even worse. In the Alola games, you have to have completed all of the trials since the rock is on the path to the Pokemon League, and in Black 2 and White 2, you can't even access Twist Mountain until you've beaten the Pokemon League. In addition to those areas not being accessible until late game, a lot of times the ice rock itself is buried deep within a difficult to navigate cavern system. The only one that's relatively easy to get to is the ice rock in Sinnoh. This is a pretty substantial contrast to the locations of the moss rocks used for Leafeon evolutions. All of them except the Kalos one can be found pretty early in the game. The Sinnoh and Hoenn moss rocks can be found before you even have 2 badges. So like I said, the process of leveling up an Eevee next to an Ice Rock is not difficult. What makes this evolution so annoying is how difficult it is to get to the Ice Rocks, if you even can. In Heart Gold and Soul Silver, there is not an Ice Rock at all, meaning it is impossible to evolve an Eevee into a Glaceon in those games. This honestly makes me feel pretty sorry for Glaceon and people who like Glaceon, since the game devs have made it very difficult and impractical to use a Glaceon in a playthrough. Number 3 is Hitmontop. When Tyrogue and Hitmontop were introduced in Generation 2, the game devs had to come up with a way to determine whether a Tyrogue would evolve into a Hitmonlee, Hitmonchan, or Hitmontop. The method they decided on was that when a Tyrogue reaches level 20, if its attack stat is higher than its defense stat, it becomes a Hitmonlee. If its defense is higher than its attack, it becomes a Hitmonchan, and if the stats are equal, it becomes a Hitmontop. Now, getting its attack or its defense higher is a relatively straightforward process. Usually, you just need to feed the Tyrogue 1 or 2 proteins for attack or 1 or 2 irons for defense, and that's enough to make one of those stats higher than the other. But getting them to be equal is substantially more difficult. While Tyrogue's base attack and base defense stats are the same, its IVs could vary widely. If you have a Tyrogue with a really high attack IV, but a really low defense IV, it's gonna be difficult to make those stats the same. You also have to be careful about what Pokemon you train it against, because the EVs it gets from battle could cause the stats to skew. Obviously the process isn't so difficult that it's impossible, but having to be so precise with how you train your Tyrogue makes getting a Hitmontop very annoying. Number 4 is Milotic. Nowadays, evolving a Feebas into a Milotic isn't particularly difficult. It's one of the several trade it while holding an item Pokemon, the item being a Prism Scale. But back in my day, prior to Generation 5, evolving a Feebas into a Milotic was substantially more difficult and annoying because you had to get its beauty stat high enough. If you don't know what that means, it's one of the 5 Pokemon contest categories. Those being beauty, cool, smart, tough, and cute. And to raise a Pokemon's beauty condition, or any of the other conditions, you have to feed it either Pokeblocks in Gen 3 or Poffins in Gen 4 that raise that particular contest stat. For beauty, you have to feed it the blue, dry flavored food, because apparently dry is a flavor. And doing this requires you to find the correct berries and then mix those and cook them into either a Pokeblock or a Poffin. This is a complicated and time-consuming process, because not only do you have to know which berries boost beauty, you also have to find them or wait for them to grow, and then you have to mix them together and cook them and then feed them. In Heart Gold and Soul Silver, it's a bit different since there are no contest stats, but you are still able to raise a Feebas's beauty condition by having it groomed by Daisy Oak or the Haircut Brothers. While you don't have to worry about finding berries and cooking them, this is still annoying since there is a limit as to how often you can do those things. Generation 5 made it a lot easier though with the introduction of the Prism Scale, an alternate and substantially less time-consuming way of evolving Feebas into Milotic. This was done partially due to necessity, since they didn't have any contest conditions in Generation 5, but I think they also felt kinda sorry for us and wanted to make our lives easier. But before the Prism Scale, or in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, getting a Feebas's beauty condition high enough to evolve was such an annoying process that I have actually never done it. I have only ever evolved Feebas by using a Prism Scale. Actually, I've never actually caught a Feebas in a Generation 3 game, since that was such a difficult thing to do as well. Man, Feebas and Milotic were just a giant pain back in the day. Number 5 is technically 2 Pokemon, those being Accelgor and Escavalier. Trade evolutions have been around since the beginning of Pokemon, and all of them have been at least somewhat annoying, since you can't do it by yourself unless you have 2 games and 2 systems. If you don't have 2 games and 2 systems, you have to make friends. And who wants to make friends? Ugh. While many trade evolutions are a bit extra annoying due to the requirement of a specific held item, there is a pair of Pokemon who has a trade evolution that is extra difficult since that specific pair of Pokemon is required. Shelmet can only evolve into Accelgor if it is traded with a Karrablast, which will then also cause the Karrablast to evolve into Escavalier. While I do love the design concept of Shelmet's shell passing on to Karrablast, thus causing both of them to evolve, it's still a really annoying thing to have to do. With any other trade evolution, you can just bring the Pokemon that you need to evolve and then trade and trade back with a friend, no matter what species of Pokemon that they trade to you. But with this pair of Pokemon, you have to have one and they have to have the other. So if you want to use an Escavalier in a playthrough, but you don't have a friend with a Shelmet, then you're screwed. The extremely specific requirements of this evolution and the fact that you need another person to carry it out definitely makes this evolution method one of the most annoying. The next Pokemon is number 6, Hydreigon. In case you were not aware, Pokemon do not level up at the exact same rate. Depending on the Pokemon species, it will require a different amount of experience to get from one level to the next than another Pokemon of a different species. Every single Pokemon falls into one of 6 experience groups, and these groups determine how much experience is required for this Pokemon to move from one level to the next. Each group also has a total experience number, which is how many experience points are required for that Pokemon to get from level 1 to level 100. The erratic group requires 600,000. The fast group requires 800,000. The medium fast group requires 1 million. The medium slow group requires 1,059,860. The slow group requires 1.25 million, and the fluctuating group requires 1.64 million. While the fluctuating group has the largest requirement to get to level 100, its level up rate up until about level 62, I want to say, is actually faster than the slow group, because when it ramps up with the amount of experience for each level is after level 62 or so. Therefore, Pokemon in the slow experience group tend to be more difficult to level up in the levels leading up to any relevant evolution. All pseudo-legendary and legendary Pokemon fall into the slow experience group, and Hydreigon, being a pseudo-legendary Pokemon, is therefore in this group. But the reason Hydreigon is the one who got an entry on this list and not the other pseudo-legendary Pokemon is that Zweilous has the highest evolution level in the entire game. Zweilous does not evolve until the absurdly high level of 64. Having to get an unevolved Pokemon in the slow experience group all the way up to level 64 is definitely very annoying. Another pair of Pokemon comprising one entry on this list is number 7, Solgaleo and Lunala. To evolve a Cosmoem into a Solgaleo or Lunala, it must reach level 53. Now, this is a pretty high evolution level. It's not as high as Hydreigon, but it's still respectably high, the 7th highest in the game. And as you probably expected, Cosmog, Cosmoem, Solgaleo, and Lunala, being legendary Pokemon, are in this slow experience group, meaning getting one of those Pokemon up to level 53 is no easy task. But the reason these Pokemon got an entry on this list, while Pokemon that evolve at a higher level that are also in the slow experience group did not, barring Hydreigon, is that Cosmog and Cosmoem are completely useless until they evolve. Cosmog can only learn Splash and Teleport, and the only move that Cosmoem gains on top of those is Cosmic Power. They literally can do no damage in battle. So while leveling up a Pokemon in the slow experience group to a high evolution level is definitely very annoying, leveling up a Pokemon in the slow experience group that can't battle is even worse. And the cherry on top of this annoyance sundae is that if you want your Cosmoem to be a Solgaleo, but you have Moon or Ultra Moon, or you want it to be a Lunala, but you have Sun or Ultra Sun, you are forced to trade it to another game to evolve it into the correct legendary Pokemon. Clearly the difficulty of leveling it up and having to deal with version exclusive evolutions makes this evolution method definitely one of the most annoying. The next entry on this list is another pair, which are here together as one entry since their situation is the same. Those being Vespiquen and Salazzle. Combee and Salandit both evolve by level up at very reasonable levels. Combee evolves at level 21 and Salandit evolves at level 33. What makes these evolutions frustrating is that only female Combee and Salandit can evolve. Now, if they had gender ratios of 50% male, 50% female, this wouldn't really be a big deal. However, Combee and Salandit have gender ratios of 87.5% male and 12.5% female. If you don't have a male cute charm Pokemon at the front of your party, it could take you quite some time to find the correct gender Pokemon. So like I said, while leveling it up isn't very hard, finding the Pokemon that can evolve in the first place definitely is. So that makes this evolution very annoying. The next entry is actually 3 Pokemon, and I promise this is the last entry that will feature multiple Pokemon. This one is number 9, Lucario, Roselia, and Chimeco. I want to make it clear up front that every single friendship evolution is annoying. It's not something that you can cheese and do really quickly just by feeding a Pokemon a rainbow bean. The fastest way to do it is by leveling up a Pokemon a lot, but that's only really practical if the Pokemon is low level. But there are some Pokemon out there that have an extra annoying requirement on top of the already annoying friendship requirement, that being the time of day. Budew and Riolu will only evolve if they have high friendship and level up during the day. And Chingling will only evolve if it levels up with high friendship during the night. You may have noticed that I did not mention Umbreon or Espeon. Like the other 3, they evolve with high friendship during a specific time of day. The difference, however, is that Eevee will evolve into something whether it is day or night. The other Pokemon will not evolve at all unless the time of day is correct. Additionally, the night requirement for Umbreon and the day requirement for Espeon is much more famous. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that boosted the friendship for their Riolu or Budew, but weren't able to evolve it because they were playing at night and were just confused as to why it would not evolve. And of course, vice versa being true for Chingling. This is definitely something that has happened to me because I was just like, oh, it has to be a certain time of day? What is the point of that? In my opinion, this specific time of day requirement that can be difficult to remember makes these friendship evolutions a lot more annoying than all of the other ones. But like I said, every friendship evolution is definitely annoying. Another time of day related annoying evolution is number 10, Dusk form Lycanroc. When midday form and midnight form Lycanroc were introduced, it was a pretty similar situation to Umbreon and Espeon. It was very easy to remember what time of day it needed to be and what game you needed to have to get your Rockruff to evolve into the right Lycanroc form that you wanted. But then Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon came around and they introduced a new form of Lycanroc, the Dusk form. And this one was way more annoying to get. Like the other 2 forms, it must be evolved during a specific time of day. However, that time window is far smaller than the other ones, being only from 5 p.m. to 5:59 p.m. in-game time. That is an annoyingly small window to have to work around, but not only do you have to deal with that, but you also have to have either an event Lycanroc or the descendant of one, since only Rockruff with the special ability Own Tempo can evolve into a Dusk form Lycanroc. Clearly, that is a lot of hoops to jump through and makes this a very annoying evolution. Hence why I never bothered to get a Dusk form Lycanroc. I got a midday form for my Pokedex and that was good enough for me. Number 11 is Goodra. The Goodra line are pseudo-legendary Pokemon, and therefore not only are they in the slow experience group, but they reach their final form at a pretty high level. In this case, level 50. That level is not as absurdly high as Hydreigon's, hence why Hydreigon got its own entry on this list. The reason Goodra is here is that not only do you have to level it up through the slow experience group, but its final evolution is dependent on factors outside of your control. A Sliggoo will only evolve into a Goodra if it levels up at level 50 or above while it is raining or foggy in the overworld. And in Generation 6, it was only rain. Rain that you summon in battle via the use of Rain Dance or Drizzle or Primordial Sea will not trigger this evolution. The weather has to already be there in the overworld. There are only a few locations in the Generation 6 and 7 games that have rain or fog all of the time, and several of those only have low-level wild Pokemon or don't have any wild Pokemon at all. The rest of the locations are erratic and won't have the weather you need all of the time. Therefore, to evolve your Sliggoo into a Goodra, not only do you have to have leveled it up a lot through the slow experience group, but you have to go to a location that can have the weather you need and hope for the best. That is obviously very annoying to deal with. Number 12 is Naganadel. Generation 4 introduced the evolution method where a Pokemon can evolve if it levels up while knowing a certain specific move. Sinnoh has the most Pokemon that evolve via this method. However, there are 3 Pokemon in later generations that evolve this way as well. As we discussed earlier, Eevee can only evolve into Sylveon if it knows a Fairy-type move. Additionally, Steenie can only evolve into Zarina if it levels up while knowing Stomp. And the third is Poipole, which will evolve into Naganadel if it levels up while knowing the move Dragon Pulse. Most Pokemon that evolve with this method learn the necessary move at a relatively reasonable level by level up. This is not the case with Poipole, with Dragon Pulse as its level 1 move, which means that unless you hatched your Poipole at level 1, you have no choice but to use a heart scale at the move reminder to teach it Dragon Pulse. You also have the option of spending battle points at a move tutor to teach it the move, but the location of this move tutor is at the battle tree, which is probably the last place in the entire game that you're going to reach. So to evolve the gift Poipole that you receive in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, you either have to trek all the way to the Pokemon League or the battle tree, then shell out a heart scale or some battle points. This is obviously very annoying to do. In a similar vein is number 13, Mamoswine. Mamoswine is one of the Generation 4 Pokemon that evolves when its pre-evolution levels up knowing a certain move. In this case, Piloswine must level up while knowing Ancient Power. And like Poipole, Piloswine doesn't learn this move at a reasonable level by level up. It's listed as a level 1 move, but since it is impossible to have a level 1 Piloswine, you have to spend a heart scale at the move reminder to teach it Ancient Power. And unlike Poipole with Dragon Pulse, there are no move tutors that you can use to teach it Ancient Power either. Well, at least none since Generation 4. Swinub can learn Ancient Power as an egg move, but if you already have a Piloswine that you want to evolve that doesn't yet know Ancient Power, your only option is the heart scale move reminder. That is freaking annoying. Number 14 is Vikavolt. Like Probopass, Magnezone, Leafeon, and Glaceon, Vikavolt can only be obtained if its pre-evolution is leveled up in a certain location. This is actually the same location that works for Probopass and Magnezone, that being a special magnetic field. In Sun and Moon, this location is Vast Pony Canyon, and that is super late game. Your Pokemon are probably gonna be a little bit over level 50 at this point, and it's right before the final trial of the game. Having to deal with an unevolved Charjabug for a massive part of the playthrough since you get Grubbin so early is a really annoying thing to have to deal with, since a lot of the time, your Charjabug is battling against Pokemon with a substantially higher base stat total. Thankfully, in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, they made it more reasonable and made it that Blush Mountain was a location that worked as well, allowing you to get a Vikavolt much earlier in the game. But in Sun and Moon, you had to deal with a Charjabug for a very long time, and that is very annoying. I should know, I did it. Also, the reason I'm not including Magnezone and Probopass in this entry is because in other games, it's not as annoying and difficult because the locations are much earlier. And the final entry on this list, the Pokemon that I think is the most annoying to obtain via evolution, is number 15, Melmetal. Meltan is the only Pokemon in history that is only obtainable in a spin-off game. You do get Manaphy's egg in a spin-off game, but you actually hatch and obtain the Manaphy in a main series game, so that doesn't count. So not only does obtaining a Meltan require you to play a game outside of the main series, but Meltan can only evolve in Pokemon Go. If you transfer a Meltan to Let's Go Pikachu or Let's Go Eevee before evolving it, it can never evolve. And evolving it in Pokemon Go is far from easy. It requires 400 Meltan candy, which is tied with Magikarp, Swablu, and Wailmer for the most amount of candy to evolve any singular Pokemon. And barring any double candy events, the most amount of candy you can obtain from one Meltan is just 7. 3 normally, doubled with a Pineapple Berry, and then +1 if you transfer it. Combine that with the limitation of only being able to catch a set amount of Meltan from the mystery box once a week, barring an event, that means it will take you literally several weeks to evolve a Meltan into a Melmetal if you don't use rare candies. So it can only happen in a spin-off game and is going to require you to put in time for multiple weeks just to evolve it. If that is not the most annoying evolution method in all of Pokemon, I don't know what is. So there we have it, those are the 15 most annoying Pokemon to evolve. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to check out some more of my fun Pokemon content, I recommend this video here. All right, that's all I have for now. So till next time, Pokefans, gotta catch them all.